Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have an outstanding man who, not only worked with all like a bunch of the satellites that we have above our head as an aerospace engineer, but most importantly, he's a father of four, a grandfather of 15, and a great grandfather of 9. And this man, if there's anything that this man knows about, it's how to be a dad. And Ed, thank you so much for spending this time with me, man. Really appreciate it. And oh, Ed, first question I always ask is, 4 kids. What are their names?
Their names are Mark, Eric, Jeff, and Linda.
Wonderful. And what has been your happiest moment so far being a dad, being a grandfather, and let's just say being a dad as that meaning all your grandparent titles as well.
Well, okay. Well, thank you. Well, I got to admit, I enjoyed being their dad when they were born, and that was pretty exciting. But when I look back on it, I think that with my kids, anyhow, the best times we had as a family was starting out when my daughter was 1, and the other 2 boys were like 4 and 2. And then she came along, and then we didn't have another one for 14 years after that. So when we were young, we started camping together. And because we didn't have enough money to have regular vacations like all our neighbors were. And so we started camping, and then we graduated to tent camping, and when I mean tent trailer camping. And so we drove all over the Western United States and down into Mexico and camped in our tent trailer. And those were some of the most exciting adventures because, on any kind of thing like that, you never know you can do all the planning you want, but stuff comes up that you never could plan for. And it's always, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? And so, but that built such a tightness with our kids that I loved that. And then I think that graduated to when my kids were up and teenagers, we started backpacking together in the Sierras. And here we were out in the wilds. We didn't see people for sometimes 2 days at a time, and we're by ourselves. And we did see bears and all of that kind of stuff. But that was some fantastic times. And I did that for 10 years or so. And we've done that now when our youngest was born. We even started doing that with their married spouses. And so that just brought our family really together in a lot of ways. So I think all of that, I've done road trips with my boys individually, and just driving all over the country and whatever. I've done road trips with my grandkids. We've gone everywhere. We've gone to Europe and the Oktoberfest and all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
And all of those times were they were so important for all of us, really getting to know each other. We talked about life for hours on end when we're in the car driving. And then we're always meeting catastrophes one way or another, and we have to work our way through those. So that was, yeah. So I hope that's not too long an answer.
No, that's wonderful. And I'm like, even the conversations that you guys had in the car, like what were some of those moments that really just stood out to you, I guess? Some of those conversations.
Oh yeah. Well, we covered the waterfront of all the lessons that I'd kind of learned in life. But we always we started this too about 25 years ago, 27 years ago. we started doing 4 questions when we get together. Doesn't matter. We get together when we travel to see them and they travel to see us. And I managed to get together with each of my grandchildren and their spouses individually and go over 4 questions. And they're pretty simple. How's your health?
Mm-hmm.
Second, how's your career going? And see, I start this even when they're in school, even in junior high school. And then how's your life with God? And so by the time we get done talking about that, it usually takes about an hour or an hour and a half. Now, when we're in the road trips, we talk about those 4 things for sure. But I also talk to them about my view on finances. Don't become a slave to money, because material wealth will not bring you joy and love and peace in your life. So it's, live on what you make and be generous with others. So
that's such a gift. Yeah, so I'm curious.
Yeah, keep going.
Has that conversation changed, or even those questions changed? Like, because I'm guessing you're still having them even with your grandkids, your great grandkids. Has that changed at all?
The questions haven't changed. The answers change a lot, because I got grandkids now that are in their 30s. And so they're on their own journey. Yeah. And so their journeys change, because we started having these conversations when they were in junior high. So the lives change, the questions don't, and the things that I feel like I've had some experience in learning over my 87 years, I just try to pass on to them what has brought me real joy. And it isn't material things.
What would you say has brought you real joy?
Oh, my relationships with all of my grandkids and my kids, and lots of friends all over the country, which are in number in the hundreds, thousands, that we've kept up with each other.
Well, yeah, I mean, all this time, yeah, that's superpower. And even just feeling the energy is like, yeah, like, why wouldn't I want to stay in touch with Ed? The other question I have, because again, you have a powerful, like a very unique experience with regard to, like, you've been around for 87 years. You've known what it's like to raise kids during a specific time period, and then seeing, again, you were like one on, like, quote unquote raising them, but you had a hand in it. You saw them grow up, and now you're seeing this with your great grandkids too. Like, what have you seen change with regard to maybe parenting styles? What have you seen change for the better in all this time?
Well, there's lots of things for the better, and maybe there's some things for the not better. But one of the things for the better is what you and I are doing right now, and which is it is easier to communicate with your kids. Right? We got iPhones, so we can talk to each other every day. and I do talk to my kids every day. We manage to, they call me or I call them, and we're generally driving somewhere in our day's activities. And so we give each other a call and say, how's it going? And I'm blessed to have my grandkids do the same with me, and I do the same with them. So on all my adult grandkids, we call each other all the time. With my kids, we call each other every day. That sounds like an overkill, but we're friends. Is more than just dads. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I've seen that with a bunch of other families where it's like, yeah, we're going to continue. Like there's such a genuine love and connection, but there's also like a genuine want. And like, I want to know how they're doing. I'm like, it's not a chore. Like, oh yeah, like I got to call grandpa now. It's not a chore for that. Or I got to call my grandma, or I got to call my parents now. And I'm curious, like, you mentioned these questions, you mentioned like just continuous conversation with your kids, your grandkids, not only on these road trips and having these special moments together. What else would you credit like helped create these relationships that you have with your kids, with your grandkids?
Well, uh, that's a good question. So I've been intentional. I don't wait. I don't wait for my friends to call me. I don't wait for my grandkids to call me.
Mm,
If they come into my mind, I call them, and
mm,
they call me. Now with my kids, it's a habit. Either I check in with them every day, or they check in with me. And we're all busy. We all got stuff. We're busy all day long, but it doesn't take long to make a call when you're driving in a car with an iPhone now, and just
mhm.
connect. And we don't talk for hours. We just talk for a few minutes. And if one of us is in the middle of something, or we're there where we're going, we just say, "Gotta go later." So
Mm,
I don't know if that really answers your question, Andrews, but it's being intentional about what really matters in life, at least to me.
yeah.
And it's relationships that matter. It's not what kind of car I drive, what kind of vacations I take, where I've traveled in the world. None of those things. And I've never met a friend my age
Hmm.
who, and we're all struggling with health when you get to be in your late 80s. But
Hmm.
I've never met a man, or even heard of a man, who said, I just wish I'd have closed one more deal. I just wish I'd have made another $100,000.
Mm,
That never happens that I know of. And if they do, they're insane. But I know there must be some people that are that greedy, but they don't have anything else. They don't have family that love them and care about them.
yeah,
So to
and
me,
it's no, like it's a powerful distinction because it's like there are many men out there. I was just speaking with a dad earlier today, and it's like yeah, like we like there's a sense of identity or purpose or just self-esteem associated with the work that you do. And I'm just curious for the dad out there who's probably listening to this and has that feeling. Like because I know I've been there sometimes where it's like I want to work. I love the stuff that I'm doing. I want to do more of it. That's what I think about. And I think there's also that sense of okay, but where else do I want to experience life? This balance. I'm curious, what advice do you have for someone who's probably thinking that way?
well, I think all of us go through periods, particularly when we're younger, that, we got to take care of ourselves, and we got to take care of our family. We got to take
Hmm.
care of our kids. So we get, it's important that we are providing for them, and
Hmm.
and training them, and being an example for them. So I think that we have to focus on earning a living to take care of our families. But of course, that can become your identity. And I would say that's not your identity. That's just what you do for a living. Your real
Hmm.
identity is who you really are in your inner person. That's your real identity. So I try to encourage my kids on that and say, no, you're not your job. They're all successful. They got a
Hmm.
tremendous work ethic, my kids, and they're all successful. And I'm very proud of them. But see, I don't think their work is their real identity at all, because we've been having this talk so long that I think they have reached out to other people and their own children.
And that's just such like here's like if you guys are seeing this and just wondering like, oh man, is it worth it? Like this man has a family, an army, an army behind him of just like people who just care and love and just want to like, especially as we get older, it's like, all right, like the people we know, they start to pass away, or maybe they move far away, and it's like the people we have are our family. And for the dad who's just starting out, maybe he's young and maybe he has his first kid already, or maybe he's planning. What is some advice that you have for him with regard to, showing up for his wife, showing up for his showing up as a father, but also creating that balance very early on? What advice do you have for him with regard to that?
Well, that's a good question. And you can only have the wisdom that you have at the time. So, but I would say if I'm talking to my kids and my grandkids, and I would say, listen, your work is not your identity. It's what you do for a living. It's what you do to put food on the table and shelter for your family and provide for them. But that's not really what life is about. It's not about the accumulation of material things or titles at work, because work is going to be over. And I got to tell you, I meet a lot of men who have a hard time when they retire for this very reason we talk about, because their work, their titles, their positions have become their identity. And then when they leave that, they've lost their purpose in life.
Yeah.
And they're struggling. And a lot of them die pretty quickly, as crazy as that sounds. But the statistics prove it that this is a hard period for men to go through.
Oh yeah. And I'm curious, with your experience, again, you're a father, grandfather, great grandfather of many, many people on this planet. I'm curious, did you ever, were there any siblings who just really clashed? Maybe they had opposite personalities or something, or maybe they just weren't really it's almost like I just don't like you. Did you ever have that in your family, or at any point?
Of course.
Well,
Yeah.
how did you help? How did you help them with that? How did you navigate that, or what is the relationship that they have with that sibling?
Well, we're talking about kids growing up and exasperating each other. This is the normal stuff in a family, and they're all different. Every one of my kids, every one of my grandkids is a unique person, and they've got some traits of their mothers and their dads and their grandparents and their great grandparents and blah, blah, blah. They've got genes from everybody in their family. So they're all individuals. They're all different. And so part of this being a family is hanging in there and doing things together and not giving up on that. And so, I mean, I'll give you a little example of some of my great, my kids now, my grandkids, when they were little, one of them would be playing with a toy and the other one would take it away. And then the little one would do something and the bigger one would take the toy and bash it over their heads. And I just, I'd separate them and I'd say, they're visiting me, for instance, and they're in my house. And I'd say, now, wait a minute. And I'd talk to the guy who bashed the other one over the head. I'd say, what are you doing that for? And he'd say, well, they did this, that, and the other. And I'd say, okay, but I know you enough to know that that's not you to take something and bash your brother over the head with it, or your sister, and cause them to run off crying to their parents. I'd say, that's not who you are. You're a good boy. I know you are. Now, I want you to start living and playing out of who you really are. And don't play out of this false you who's not you at all. This angry you and this bitter you and who's got to get even person. That's not who you are. So be who you really are. Now, I don't know if that helps at all, but they do that as teenagers. But all my kids now are tight with each other. They all love each other and they all support each other. and they support each other's children. They support their nephews and nieces in the same way.
No, that is so powerful. And I'm curious again. So these were your grandkids, right? When they were
Yeah,
like that example.
but I
So,
could give you examples of of my own kids.
well,
That
no, I'm curious more of like that. That's a perfect example for when they're young. I'm curious, how did they show up? Like maybe they were teenagers. Were they still having those same fights with the same sibling? And if so, what was the conversation with them?
well, they mostly settled it amongst themselves, but
Mm,
it's about it. The way is about, if you harbor bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness in your own life, it's like taking a spoonful of poison every day and hoping the other person dies.
mm,
So if you have those things and you can't let go of them in your own life, you'll wind up a bitter, lonely old person and have no friends and nobody that cares about you.
wow. And that is, I just love, like, to me, even just thinking about it, like, yeah, like, of course they know how to resolve it amongst themselves by then, because they've already been doing it. They've already been practicing and learning how to do it from an early age through you and through their parents, and their parents learned it from you and your wife. And like, just this experience is like, yeah, like literally prepared them for adulthood, prepared them for being older and how to deal with things.
Well, I think one of the main jobs as a father and a mother is to prepare your kids, not to where they're perfect kids when they're 2 and they're potty trained just right. And then they go on and they're little children, and then they go on to adolescence, and then they go on to teenage years. And but the goal is that you train them and teach them at all stages of their life, so that when they're ready to leave home and go to college, that you've prepared them on how to make good decisions, on how to know what company to keep, because bad company produces bad morals.
Mm,
So, to know how to choose friends wisely. And so you want to prepare them for life, not when they're in your home anymore. And by the way, since you're mentioning this, what I've had to go through a lot with my own kids is to say, look, when your kids reach the latter part of their teenage years, it's time for you to transition from being a directive, corrective parent into being an encouraging life coach, just like you're doing, Andres. Because what they need is somebody speaking encouragement into their life and reminding them who they are and telling them they can do it. Whatever it is, they can do it with their courses. They can do it in the relationships that they're having. They can to just encourage, be a voice of encouragement, and leave it to their parents to do the corrective directive. So that's what I've been doing as a grandparent and a great grandparent. I just get to say, to love my great grandkids and my grandkids and be a word of encouragement into their life, because they need that.
yeah, and that's where it's very easy, kind of in this day and age where everyone's almost ultra independent, but also kind of dependent of like living home, but like, I'm going to do things my way, but like, I'm not going to talk to you about my problems. I know I've done that way more than I care to admit. And it's this sense of like thinking that you're alone. Like, I love what you said, is like, no, like, you're never alone, and just sharing that, and just from the beginning. And for the parent who probably feels a little distant from their kids, or probably feels like they don't have that kind of like connection, what is some advice that you have for them?
Get over yourself. Don't wait for your kids to call you or be in communication with you. I've seen so many dads that say, well, they know my telephone number. Well, those kind of words never come out of my mouth. And I don't wait. And so I would say to dads, if you want to have a relationship with your children, and by the way, they need you to have a good relationship with them. And they'll never stop needing that, because once you're a father for life. And they'll always need that voice of encouragement and support into their life if they're going to really be the men you want them to grow up to be. So I say, so don't wait for anybody to call you. Get on the telephone. Get on any way you have to communicate with them, and do it. And don't wait another hour.
Well, you hit on something very beautiful there, because a good mentor of mine, Paul Reddick, he spoke about years ago. It was like when you want your family to like kind of maybe not so much like change, like sometimes change the trajectory of where your family's going. Sometimes you have to go there first. Sometimes you have to be the one. Yeah.
Always.
Like if you want the change, you create the change. And that's for you if you're the son, if you are the father, if you are the daughter, if you are the sister, if you are the like whatever change you want to create, like if you know it's going to help and serve your family better, like you go there first. You don't wait for permission. You don't wait for kind of what you were speaking at of like, well, if they're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. Well, if both of us don't do it, like, all right, well, it's just not going to get done. And the only thing that happened was we stroke each other's egos, and that doesn't change anything.
And I would say along those lines, just to say amen to what you've said, is that, see, I really run across a lot of guys who say, well, they know my telephone number. And I say, okay, the first thing, if you're going to have a good relationship with anybody, including your wife or your ex-wife or whatever else, you got to give up the right to be right. And that's step one. So that requires a little bit of humility. Yeah. And you've got to then say, but is the end result, is it worth it? And I would say, yeah, because your kids are going to need you their whole life. And they're going to need you to speak words of life and words of wisdom that they don't have yet. So make sure that you stay in contact with your kids.
I'm curious so there are a lot of parents out there who are, estranged from their kids, or maybe their kids, like, I just don't want you in my life anymore. And, or maybe like, and this coming from the sense of like, maybe this child is, or their child, like this could be 30, 40, 50-year-old person, but they're like, playing the victim role, or maybe they're, around the bad crowd or something. And it's like, all right, like I want a relationship with my kid, but they don't want a relationship with me. What is some advice that you have for that person?
Well, relationships are always two-sided, right? And you can't be responsible for anybody but your side. So if your life is filled with love and joy and peace and goodness and kindness and humility and faithfulness and gentleness, then you can be that to your child, even though they may not want to have any relationship with you. And if you need to apologize for something that you're responsible for, do it. Don't wait. And don't make excuses. If you've done something that's really hurt your child and that's the cause of the breakup, then you need to deal with that and say, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. And I'd do anything to make up for that. But see, that's the key to all relationships, isn't it? Not just father-children, but husband-wife.
Yeah.
And friend to friend. If you want to have friends, you have to be a friend.
I love that. Did you ever see the movie with Robin Williams and what's it, Matt Damon, Good Will Hunting?
Yes.
Do you remember when Matt Damon was like they were talking and Robin Williams is like, it's okay. And he's like, what are you like, yeah, I know it's okay. And then he just kept saying it. And then eventually Matt Damon just breaks down crying and hugs him.
Yes.
That reminds me of that's the analogy that reminds me of what you just said. Like, yeah, like I love you and I want you in my life. And they're saying, no, I'm good. Like, I don't want this. And this is why. And they're like, I love you and I want you. Like, you keep showing up, keep being intentional, keep being there. And eventually, like, every kid wants their parent in their life. And it's just
Every
that
kid
phase.
needs their parent in their life.
Yeah. And it's just that, again, you hit on so many good things. Like, you can only control your part of the relationship. And that goes for how you show up, but that also goes for how you've shown up in the past. And being humble and being having the love for them enough to tell them that you're sorry for your part in it because you love them enough to tell them, enough to look bad in that way. And it's just like, I'm not giving up on our relationship because I want it. Like, that to me is just, that's the analogy that comes to mind. Like, that's the level of love and certainty and just going in that direction. And they're gonna have to do their part. They're gonna have to do their part of
They may
saying
never
they're
do
sorry.
their part, but so what?
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
no, they may not.
yeah, it's
That's up to them.
that's
We
up to
don't
them.
control that. But that
That's
doesn't
right.
mean we don't show up.
But see, if you want to have self-respect for yourself, you need to do what's right and always do what's right, even though it's the hardest thing to do in many kinds of situations. It may not be your fault, but you need to do what's right and don't whine about it and don't make excuses. I'm talking men to men now, right?
Yeah.
You need to do what is right and you need to set that example for your kids. If you want them to grow up to be men who do what is right, even though it's the hardest thing to do.
I love that. And my next question to you too is, you have such a large family. It's kind of an understatement, but with regard to that, like, if I'm one of these 15 grandkids, or like if I'm one of these 9 great grandkids, that's 15 people above me, then another 4, well, 8, including their parents. And then we've got you 2 up there, let alone all my other grandparents. Like you said, like, hey, like, it just takes like a 5-minute phone call. But what do you recommend for something like, oh man, I gotta call, what is this, 20 people a day?
No, I don't call 20 people a day, but I talk to a lot of people all over the country who I've been friends for 72 years.
Yeah.
Think about that. and most of their other friends have died, and yet we have a friendship that we've kept. And I have many friends like that. So no, I can't spend my whole day on the telephone, and I don't. So I don't worry about how many times I call them. I just make sure that they know that I love them and that I'm for them and I'm interested in them and their lives. So if it's once every 2 weeks, fine. If it's once, they're all busy, right? They're trying to make a living and they're trying to get ahead in life, and they got their own kids and they're busy with their kids and blah, blah, blah. But I don't care. I just say, okay, when you get a moment, let's talk. And amazing, see, we started off, if you can indulge me just a minute, this is something that you have to build a foundation for, to have this kind of family relationship. So if you got just a minute, I'll say that I started doing something with my kids about 27 years ago. And that is, I started taking them on road trips, and I was associated with the prayer breakfast. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but
no.
So I took them back there a few times and on road trips associated with that. And then one day they said, well, going out there to Washington and meeting all these people and meeting all the senators and the congressmen and whatever, blah, 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 and doing all that. That's really exciting. But, the best thing about it was the time we spent together. So they said, why don't we start having our own road trip? And just all us guys get together. So we started. And that turned out to be the most incredible weekend that any of us had ever had, me included. And so we decided that we were going to come and say, okay, where are we now? Excuse me, where were we 2 years ago with our life? Where are we now? And where are we going for the next 2 years? And my son, who was a sophomore in college, my youngest son, said, he was the one that came up with that suggestion. And I said, great idea. And so let's do it by covering these 4 questions. And so that turned out to be such an intense, really hard time. We never got out of our hotel room. We had all kinds of activities and adventure playing. We spent 2 days of the most intense times of our life. And they asked me every question that they had ever wanted to ask me. And I had to answer them honestly. There was no way to fake it. We came out of that and we were tight going into it. But when we came out of that, we were like one voice. And then they started saying, I want my boys to experience what we just had. So we spent the day driving from Sedonia, where we did this, back to Phoenix. And so we spent the day saying, okay, some of the stuff we talked about is not age appropriate. And so we had that big discussion. And we said, okay, when the guys get to be 13 and they're just a new teenager, we're going to invite them in to this. And we're going to keep doing it every year. So we did that. And so as the guys became 13, they started joining up with us. And so we just included them all. And we all pledged to them. We had a special prayer for them. And we all pledged that we would be there for them for life and support them financially, emotionally, and spiritually. And when my grandkids retell that story, that was one of the biggest and still is highlights of their life. And my 3 sons have been those kind of uncles to them. So we kind of grew into this. Are you following me? And then the girls said, well, wait a minute, Grandpa, when do we get our time? And so I started doing the same thing. I don't have a weekend with my but every time we visit, and I have granddaughters, and we have family reunions, everything. And when they're in my house and I'm in theirs, we find a way to go away for about an hour and we go over the same 4 questions. So we've just built on that. And that's the way they are with their kids now.
And it's the same 4 questions you mentioned on the road trip at the beginning.
And I go over them with all the friends I have across the country now that, I've been professional friends with and other kind of friends. We do the same kind of, they're spiritual questions, but they're good questions anyhow. And we find that when we do those 4 questions and we're all honest, there's no point in doing them if you're not going to be honest with each other.
Yeah.
And the 4 questions are, how's your health? How's your career going? How's your life in all your relationships? And then the last one is, how's your faith life doing?
Wow. And all these conversations, obviously, these other questions are stemmed from it, I could imagine. That's powerful. I think there's definitely something, and it's something that I've noticed very much with men, that there's just something very special about having just that unique time with other men where it's concentrated, focused, like there's no distractions. We are together, we're doing this together. And it's like we're doing life together. There's just something so significant about a group of men just connecting in that space. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ed. And I love the question that you guys ask is, where are we now and where are we going? I think that's such a cool question, even just to ask as a family. Hey, where are we now and where do we want to go together?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Well, anyhow, we've been doing it for 27 years. So it's almost, and by the way, I now do it with all my friends all over the country that sometimes I can't travel as much now. And you know, we can't travel and see each other, but we still, this is the way we catch up. This is the way we stay close. This is the way I know what's going on in their lives and in their families and blah, blah, blah.
That's all. Do you still ask that question? Like, how's your career, even if everyone's retired?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Because, you know, you never retire from the important things.
Yeah.
So I still have a career of doing what's important to me. And it involves people and being in people's lives. And by the way, just as an aside, I don't know if this is not part of fatherhood, but it's a mentorhood. But I have groups of guys that I still meet with every day of the week. And we haven't met together in person in 2 years because of COVID, but we dial it in. And so these are groups of men. And there's about 50 guys, 45 to 50 guys I meet with for an hour every day of the week. They're not 50, but they're 5 different groups. They average about 10 apiece.
Okay.
And we do life together.
Wow.
And that's a powerful thing. And I've done that with groups of young guys that are not married. And Brian was one of those guys who and he had about 5 or 6 friends, and you know, somehow our paths crossed, and so they started meeting with me and another guy, and then the other guy dropped out and it was me. And so they'd come to my house and we'd spend a half a day together, and I'd order in submarine sandwiches, and we were just doing life together. Well, that's my career now.
That's no, I love that. I love the intentionality, even these questions. And again, you've been, you know, you've lived an incredible life of service, and just, I'm curious, what advice do you have for dads who are going through tough times right now? What is some advice that you have for them?
Well, and I've had my share of those. And I would say, you know, the big thing is, and I think, you know, failure does not define you. In fact, dealing with trials and tribulations and difficulties and dealing with it is what defines you. And so nobody that goes through life escapes that, either in their marriages or in their family or with their jobs. Everybody is going to face difficulties, and it doesn't matter whose fault it is. So how you handle those difficulties defines what kind of person you're going to wind up with, be. So you're either going to be a bitter, lonely old man and die that way, or you're going to have people that love you and care about you and respect you and want to be doing stuff with you.
I think that's so, like, wanting to spend time with you, wanting to do life with you. Like, if you're saying no to everything and just no to your abilities to create something, like, it's kind of like what you said, like, at even no matter what age you are, bad company is still bad company. And it's like, how can I be good company despite the tough times? How can I, it's almost like, again, like Tony Robbins says, like, our destiny is shaped in our decisions. and this is one decision. How can I show up in this decision?
Yeah, and see, I would say that that's true. And you know something? Here's the story I say of redemption, and it applies to every person. You can make 5 bad decisions, which get you in a position you're in, but you can correct it with 1 good decision.
Mm,
So you don't have to let your bad decisions define yourself,
mm.
because you just need to start making some good ones.
Yeah,
And you
and
can
it's
do
what you
it.
choose, what you
It's
choose your
what
identity to be.
That's exactly it. You have to choose, who really am I? And do I want to keep going in the direction I'm going, which has got me in a pretty tight spot.
Mm.
So how do I get out of this? Or you need to make a couple of good decisions and you're on your way for a different life.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm curious, if we were able to, for some reason, snap our fingers and we're back in time and you are becoming a father for the first time, what would you do the same?
Well, you know, that's a great question. But so I'm going to answer it kind of in 2 ways.
Mhm.
I've always wanted to be a good dad. There's never a time when I didn't want to be a good dad and a good husband. But I didn't have, when I went through hard times in my own life and even hard times in our marriage, it was the hard times that really, I wish I'd have had the wisdom that I have now when I was going through that.
Mhm.
And part of it was I got overcommitted when I was young in my 30s, because it's just the way I was doing things. I mean, I was head of a major national security satellite program. I was head of a pretty big growing church on a temporary basis when our pastor resigned and told me and another guy we needed to keep it going, and we don't need to get a outside pastor to come in. And I decided, this is one of those really smart decisions, that I needed to go back and get another graduate degree in engineering. And I did them all 3 at once. And I look back on that and I say, that was so foolish. And I was overcommitted. And it hurt our whole family, and it really hurt me, even my health. So, I mean, but I look back on that, and it turned out to be a tremendous turning point in my life. And I needed to, I hadn't had a lot of failure till then that mattered. But that mattered to me about my marriage and my family. And so it was a turning point for me to get going in a better direction, in a different direction, which I'm now thankful for. And so is my wife, and so are my kids.
I love that. Just being cautious of the amount of commitments you have, not over committing. And just because, again, there's that balance.
Yep.
How do I want to show up as a husband? How do I want to show up as a father? How do I want to show up as a friend? How do I want to show up in my work, as a student, for myself, for God? Love
Yep.
that. And if you were so that kind of answered the question of how would you do it differently, but what would you do the same? Or actually, knowing the wisdom that you have and how you have shown up for your kids and your grandkids and your whole family, what would you do the same? And let's not answer with, well, like, let's keep in mind that, yeah, you're going to ask these questions, yeah, you're going to do these road trips, yeah, you're going to do this family time. What else would you do the same?
Well, frankly, because of the way it's turned out, I don't think I could do anything different, because at the time, I think all my motives were in the right direction. And it was just, I was 30 some odd. I needed some failure to where I needed to put my trust and my hopes in God instead of me. They always were there, but I just needed some failure so that I really, because I needed to be broken of achievements on, and that I credited to my own self. And so while that was really painful on all of us, we really found a better life, both in our marriage. I've been married now 65 years ago. So we've already celebrated our 65th. So our marriage is still, it's better now than it's ever been. And so we're helping each other get across the streets, and I'm walking on a cane and trying to help my wife. And we're both going about 1 mile an hour as we walk. But so what? We love life and we love each other, and our life is still full and rich in every way that counts.
We're always moving forward. They never said how fast, but we're always moving forward.
So it's a hard question to ask. What would I, if I hadn't had the difficulty, we wouldn't be that, and our marriage would not be that it is today. So it was the most horrible time in our life, because we were head over heels in love with each other, but it was puppy love. Now we have a better love.
Yeah, that is huge. My pastor said that. A number of my pastors have said that, and it's like, yeah, like this is the test. Like this is the true test of the true love. It's not just the infatuation or the fun stuff. It's like choosing them over and over again.
Well, as you can tell, a lot of my stuff I've talked about really is my, as well as my being a father. It's been my own faith journey, and so and my kids and my grandkids and my great grandkids are all on their independent, individual faith journeys. And I've just learned enough to know everybody's got to do their own journey, but they still need the voice of their great granddad speaking words of life and encouragement and love into them. And my boys now, who are 64 and 62 and so on, they're successful, all of them, but they still need to hear their dad say, "I am so proud of you, and I am so glad and that you've turned out to be the man you are." And frankly, now we're best friends more than dad and son, if that makes any difference.
No, it totally makes sense. And it's this transition, like this is he's above me, he's telling me what to do, and like, oh, now we're doing this together. And that is so special that you shared, like, even your 64-year-old son still needs to know that dad is proud of him. There's such a gift in that. And for the dad out there who maybe he doesn't live with his kids, maybe he was in a divorce, and maybe he lives in another state, another city, another country, what is some advice that you have for him with regard to being a great dad?
Well, that's a tough one, and that's a hard one. So there's no easy answer to that, except that, I'd say, it's something we always say, you can still be intentional about being a good dad to the best you can be. You may not be with them physically, and you may not be with them, but maybe a few times a year or whatever your arrangement is, but still you can stay in their life, and you can be that word of encouragement to them. And you can still tell them that, you're proud of them. You can still speak love to them and let them know you care about them, and their best interest is your whole desire for them. And you can communicate that in a lot of ways. And if necessary, use words. St.
love that.
Francis of Assisi said that.
That's a good one. Um, for the dad who maybe he's a grandfather now, but he doesn't have that relate like he doesn't have his kids don't call him, or his grandkids don't really call him, or feels distant, feels like he doesn't have that relationship where they are equals or they're just distant from one another. What advice do you have for him?
Well, I'm being repetitious, but I'm saying if you want a relationship with anybody, even friends,
Yeah.
and particularly family, then you got to be intentional. So you have to pick up the telephone and call them. And of course, when I call them, when we do the 4 questions, I let them choose who goes first, you, me, or do we alternate? And of course, it always starts out when the kids are young, they want to go first because they want to talk about themselves. So fine. Sometimes that's all we get through. but I learn a lot about them from what they tell me about their lives. And so the next time I call them, I just tell them I love them. I'm praying for them, seeing how they're doing. That's how I stay. So I don't wait for them to say, well, they know my telephone number. If they want to talk to me, they can call me.
I love that. And for the dad who's expecting, or maybe the dad who's about to be, who's maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months in to being a new dad, what advice do you have for him?
Well, he doesn't know yet what's going to hit him. So batten down the hatches, because his kids are going to bring him so much joy and so much happiness, but they're also going to bring him a lot of sleepless nights. And being a good dad is not for sissies, and it's not for the self-centered. In essence, you got to give up your life for your kids and their well-being.
I love that. And so you're the first man I'll ask this question, but for the man who wants a 65-year-old relationship with his wife, what advice do you have for him? Maybe he's in the middle of it. Maybe he's just starting out. What advice do you have for a man who wants to be in love with his wife more tomorrow than he is today?
Well, I will say your love changes and it matures like you do as a person. So what can start out as total head over heels, passionate love for this wonderful creature that seems to love you back, and you know that all they want to do with their whole life is to make you happy. Well, that's the way you can start off, but it doesn't take too long to find out that no, it's not all they want to do is to make you happy. They have a life of their own. So you can't, it's way too much of an expectation to put on your wife that it's her job to make you happy, or it's your job to make her happy. That has to come from within themselves, and it has to come within yourself. But I mean, so to me, it's pretty clear that it's my job to lay down my life for my wife and love her unconditionally, whether she deserves it or not. And if you ask my wife, she would say it's her job to show me respect, whether I deserve it or not. And she's told that to many women. And she even trumps it a little bit more. And she adds to it, and by the way, give him all the sex he wants. Anytime, any place, and the riskier, the better. Now, I can't tell you how many women have come back to her and said, And these were women that were having marriage problems. So many women have come back to her and she says, "You can't believe how our marriage has changed."
That is outstanding. It's my pastor said a funny thing. He's like, yeah, just it's statistics. Don't have the television in the bedroom because you will have more sex. So funny.
Well, anyhow, maybe I'm being too personal, but that's you asked me about how marriages change. Well, our marriage has matured like we have matured.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really understand that love is more about laying down your life for the other one than getting what you want out of marriage. And the more you do that, the more you lay down your life for your wife, the better woman, the better wife, the better person she becomes in what her purpose in life is. And she feels better about herself because she has a husband that really lays down his life and loves her.
I love that. And Ed, this last question is not for me. It's not for any dad in particular. Well, at least 3 dads at least. What would you like to tell each of your kids, grandkids, great-grandkids?
Well, I mean, I think I've already told them. I've told them many times. And if you ask them, what has Grandpa told them? Or what has my dad told me? I've told them everything I know to tell them about how they can have the greatest adventurous life that they were meant to have. And they may take little side journeys here and there, but that's not who they really are. And so we've had those kind of talks. And I think they could repeat to you what I've told them. And I don't think if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and I was gone, I don't think I would. I think I would, if I was having my, after your heart quits beating, they say your mind keeps going on for about 30 seconds or maybe even a little longer. I think my last thoughts would be, okay, I told them everything. I don't have anything I wish I'd have told them.
Wow. Ed, you are a gift, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your advice, what you've done as a father, grandfather, great-grandfather. To me, this is something that I'm going to be listening to for a very long time, over and over again, because there's just so much. And God bless you, man. I hope to get you on here for something else, because I think there's just so much wisdom that you have, so much great experience of just not just from the time, but the results. Like a family this tight knit is just such a special thing. And thank you so much, Ed. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing what you're doing. I think it's desperately needed right now. Is guys need to be encouraged to be good fathers, because it's not easy, and particularly depending on circumstances. But good stuff. Keep it up, Andres.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay.